Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
There is a moment, somewhere in the depths of 10,000 years of war, that repeats itself across 1,000 worlds and 100,000 battlefields. A chapter master stands at the eye of a storm that would consume entire armies. The air around him is thick with the screaming of shells and the copper tang of blood, and lesser men would have turned and run already. Run until their legs gave out or the darkness took them. But standing at his side, unflinching, breathing through the horror with the calm patience of creatures who have long since made peace with death, are a handful of warriors unlike anything else on that field of slaughter. Their armor is old, older than the fortress monasteries they call home, older than the campaigns carved into the chapter's historical records, older than the names engraved on the honor rolls hanging in halls of stone and candlelight. Each plate has been worn by legends. Each shoulder guard has carried the weight of centuries. Their faces, hidden behind visored helms, tell you nothing of their mood. And yet every soldier on that battlefield who catches a glimpse of them understands, on some instinctive level, that they are looking at the best the Adeptus Astartes have ever produced. These are the Honor Guard, and if you haven't spent much time thinking about them, if they've existed at the edge of your awareness as a unit category you've seen in codexes without really stopping to understand what they represent, then settle in, because what we're about to walk through together is one of the richest, most layered, as most quietly fascinating corners of the entire Warhammer 40,000 setting. The Honor Guard isn't just a collection of elite warriors. It's a living institution. It's a philosophical statement about what it means to be a space marine at the absolute apex of their craft. It is, in some chapters, a sacred brotherhood that predates the heresy itself, with traditions that have survived the deaths of gods and the breaking of galaxies. We're going to look at where the concept came from, how it evolved across different chapters, who the specific warriors are that fill these roles, and what the deeper lore tells us about what it actually means to stand in the Honor Guard. We'll travel from the Great Crusade to the present nightmare of the 41st Millennium and beyond. We'll walk through the Ultramarines and their legendary guard, into the golden perfection of the Blood Angels' sanguinary guard, through the mist-drenched traditions of Fenris and the Wolf Guard, past the bone-white shadows of the Deathwing, and up to the howling zeal of the Emperor's champion of the Black Templars. And we won't stop there, because the story of the Honor Guard doesn't end with the old way of things. There are new warriors filling old roles, carrying ancient traditions forward into an era that's even darker and more desperate than anything their predecessors ever faced. Pull up a chair, let the sound of bolter fire fade into something distant and comfortable, because right now we're going to talk about the finest warriors in the Imperium, and we're going to do it slowly, carefully, and with the reverence the subject actually deserves. Part 1. The Shape of Honor. What an Honor Guard actually is. Before we get into specifics, it's worth spending some time just sitting with the concept itself, because Honor Guard is one of those terms that gets used across the setting in ways that can blur together if you're not paying attention. At its most essential, an Astartes Honor Guard is an elite cadre of veteran space marines who have given many Terran centuries of exceptionally courageous service to their chapter. Notice the phrasing there. Centuries, not years, not decades. We're talking about warriors who have spent lifetimes that would encompass entire human civilizations dedicated entirely to the art and practice of war. The Honor Guard isn't a stepping stone. It isn't a prestigious assignment you accept while you're working your way towards something else. As for the warriors who join it, the Honor Guard is the destination. It is the answer to the question of what a space marine becomes when they have already done everything else. Every member of a chapter's Honor Guard has received the very highest honors and accolades their battle brothers can bestow. This is a crucial detail, because in a culture as honor-obsessed as the Adeptus Astartes, where even a single campaign badge carries deep significance, having received all of those awards means something enormous. These warriors haven't just won a few battles. They haven't just distinguished themselves on a single memorable campaign. They have fought over and over across the full nightmare catalogue of enemies the galaxy can produce and they have kept fighting. They have buried brothers. Even they have watched chapter masters fall and watched new ones rise. They have seen the face of the enemy change. Chaos, Xenos, heretic, traitor, and adapted and persisted and carried the fight forward regardless. The ancient sources say that the most veteran members of a chapter's honor guard have, over the course of their careers, slain more enemies than an entire regiment of the Imperial Guard will encounter across its entire existence. Read that again and let it settle. A regiment, thousands of soldiers, a lifetime of deployment, all of that. And the eldest of the honor guard have killed more, individually. There are names in the Ultramarines' record of heroes, preserved in the Fortress Monastery on Macragge, of honor guard members who have won more victories in their service than entire companies of other Space Marines. And yet, here is the part that makes the honor guard philosophically interesting rather than just militarily impressive. Despite possessing all of this accumulated wisdom, all of this experience that dwarfs even most company captains, the honor guard do not impose their counsel uninvited. This is a deliberate, principled choice. These warriors understand that to openly offer strategic advice to a captain would be to undermine that captain's authority in the eyes of their men. And a Space Marine captain who has lost the confidence of their warriors is a captain compromised. So the honor guard hold their tongues. They stand, they watch. They carry out the orders given to them with silent, almost unnerving competence. And when they are asked for their advice, then they speak. And their words carry a weight that causes even the chapter master to listen very carefully. This is not submission. This is sophistication. This is the difference between a warrior who has grown old enough to be impulsive and one who has grown old enough to be wise. The honor guard understand that their role is not to lead from the front in the way a captain leads, barking orders and driving the battle plan forward. Their role is to be the living anchor of the chapter's will, the physical embodiment of its ideals and traditions. They are the chapter's honor made flesh, and like all things made holy, they are treated with a particular kind of quiet reverence. Membership in the honor guard is typically drawn from the first company of a chapter, the elite veterans. Just the warriors who have already passed through every other rank and emerged on the far side, refined by combat into something harder and more precise than the Space Marines around them. Some chapters maintain the honor guard as a permanent, standing institution, its membership changing only when a member falls in battle, or, in extremely rare cases, steps down voluntarily to return to the companies. That last option, stepping down, is so unusual that it's spoken of in almost mythological terms, reserved for extraordinary circumstances, like a company suffering catastrophic casualties that strip it of experienced warriors who can carry the younger fighters through. The specific composition of an honor guard varies between chapters, reflecting the divergent traditions and cultures that have grown up across the 10,000 years since the second founding. Some chapters place enormous emphasis on the chapter champion, the finest single combat warrior in the force, whose specific duty is to take on any challenger who seeks to test the chapter master in personal combat. Others build their guard more as a collective of veteran advisors and protectors, with the champion as just one distinguished member among many. Some chapters draw their honor guard directly from the ranks of their assault veterans, choosing warriors who can surround the chapter master in a blaze of close combat ferocity. Others prefer a more adaptable formation, including a standard bearer, a champion, specialists of various kinds, and a core of veteran fighters who can flex to whatever role the battle demands. What never changes, regardless of the specific configuration, is this. When an honor guard is present on a battlefield, the entire dynamic of that field shifts. The enemies of the Imperium have learned, over 10,000 years of painful experience, that the appearance of a chapter's honor guard means something terrible is about to happen to them. These are not warriors who lose. These are not warriors who yield ground. These are the Space Marines who stand over the bodies of their chapter master when everything else has failed, who keep fighting when the tactical situation has turned from bad to catastrophic, who have simply outlasted every opponent they have ever faced. And when one of them falls, through some terrible confluence of firepower and misfortune, an honor guard warrior is brought low. The response of their brothers is not to panic. It is not to fall back. It is to fight harder. The grief comes later, in quiet chambers, in the careful ritual of recovering the body and returning it to the chapter's vault of heroes. In the moment, the honor guard closes the gap left by their fallen brother and continues, because that is what they do. That is all they have ever done. There's also a practical reality to the honor guard that is easy to miss when you're focused on the symbolism. The chapter master of an Adeptus Astartes chapter is, at any given time, one of the most tactically valuable individuals in that area of the Imperium. They are the repository of centuries of experience. But the linchpin of this chapter's command structure, the person whose death or incapacitation would immediately degrade the chapter's fighting effectiveness in ways that can't be quickly compensated for. Losing a squad sergeant is a setback. Losing a company captain is a significant blow. Losing a chapter master is a crisis that can take decades to recover from, both operationally and in terms of the chapter's internal cohesion and morale. The honor guard exists partly, therefore, as insurance, as redundancy, as the specific commitment of exceptional resources to an exceptionally critical protection task. And the warriors who fill this role understand that being the best the chapter has doesn't make them invulnerable. It makes them the right choice for a job where invulnerability would be the ideal, but commitment is what's actually available. They know the mathematics. They know that protecting the chapter master might mean interposing their own body between him and something that would kill them. They have made peace with that arithmetic and still stepped forward because the chapter's continuation is worth more than any individual warrior's survival, including their own. This is, incidentally, why the honor guard occupies such a specific psychological position within the chapter's culture. They are revered not despite the fact that their role might kill them, but partly because of it. These are warriors who have seen enough of the galaxy to calculate the risks accurately, who understand precisely what they're volunteering for when they accept a place in the guard, and who made the choice anyway. That's not ignorance. That's not recklessness. That is the particular courage of someone who sees clearly and chooses the harder path with open eyes. The equipment that honor guard members carry into battle is worth discussing in more detail, because it tells you something about how the chapter values these warriors. Access to the chapter armory, for most Space Marines, is a function of their rank and specific assignment. You carry what your role requires and what your rank entitles you to. For the honor guard, and the armory is essentially open, these warriors have rare access to the most exceptional weapons and armor the chapter possesses, including items that are otherwise restricted to the chapter master himself or held in the reliquaries as objects of almost religious significance. What this means in practice is that an honor guard warrior in the field is carrying history as much as they are carrying weapons. The power sword at their side might have been carried by a warrior who died 6 centuries ago holding a bridge that shouldn't have been holdable. The bolt pistol at their hip might have been reloaded for the last time by someone who is now commemorated on the wall of the chapter's Hall of Heroes. And the artificer armor encasing their body has been repaired and maintained by tech marines who approached the work with something approaching prayer, understanding that the armor they tended had been into places where history was being made and would go into such places again. Every piece of the ensemble carries a weight that goes beyond its physical mass. This accumulation of significance is deliberate. The honor guard are walking repositories of the chapter's physical heritage, and equipping them with the most historic and powerful items in the armory is part of how the chapter ensures that those items remain in active use rather than gathering reverence in a locked room. The sword that was meant to be swung should be swung. The armor that was designed to be walked into battle should walk into battle. The chapter keeps these objects alive through use, and the honor guard is the mechanism by which that continued life is maintained. There's one more aspect of the honor guard's role that deserves explicit attention before we move forward. What happens after a battle? The post-combat behavior of the guard reveals something about their relationship to the broader chapter community that is distinct from most elite units. When the shooting stops and the swords are sheathed and the casualties are counted, The honor guard doesn't simply stand down and await the next deployment. They tend to the dead. They ensure that fallen brothers, their own, and where possible, others, are recovered with dignity. The body of an honor guard member who has been killed in battle is, the lore tells us, offers something that his surviving brothers fight to recover regardless of what that recovery might cost. The warrior who earned their place through exceptional service should not be left where they fell. Their body and the equipment they carried returns to the chapter. This commitment to recovery is partly practical. A dead warrior's gene seed must be harvested by the apothecaries to continue the biological legacy of the chapter, and lost gene seed represents a genuine, long-term degradation of the chapter's ability to create new warriors. But it's also something more than practical. It's a statement about the value placed on these specific individuals, and about the bonds that form within a group of warriors who have spent decades or centuries operating in close proximity to each other, was sharing risks and protecting each other through situations that would break most people. The honor guard doesn't leave its dead. That's not just a rule. It's a reflection of what these warriors mean to each other. Part 2. In the beginning, honor guards of the Great Crusade. To understand the honor guard as it exists in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, you need to understand where it came from. And that means going back, way back. Back to an age before the Horus Heresy, before the breaking of the legions, before the darkness settled over the Imperium like a shroud that 10,000 years of war has failed to lift. During the Great Crusade, in the era before everything went catastrophically wrong, the Space Marine legions were massive, ambitious, world-conquering armies that swept across the galaxy in the name of the Emperor. Whilst each legion was commanded by a primarch, a being of impossible genetic perfection, part general and part god, bred specifically for the task of bringing the galaxy to heel. The primarchs were superhuman, even by the extraordinary standards of the Adeptus Astartes. They were faster, stronger, more resilient, more strategically gifted than anything the galaxy had produced outside of the Emperor himself. In a fight, even a primarch facing overwhelming odds was genuinely terrifying. And that's before you factor in the legendary equipment they carried, the psychic gifts some of them wielded, or the sheer supernatural weight of their presence on a battlefield. Given all of that, the honor guard during the Great Crusade served a subtly different function from what it would later become. Because when your commander is already among the most dangerous beings in the known universe, his bodyguard isn't primarily there to protect him from physical harm. It's there to honor him. It's there to acknowledge, in the most tangible possible way, that this warrior's deeds are so exceptional that they have earned the right to walk at the Primarch's side. And yet the guards also serve genuine military functions. When a Primarch really needed something done right, when a mission was too important to trust to a standard tactical deployment, when the stakes were high enough that only the very best would suffice, it was the honor guard who stepped forward. Some of them functioned almost as commandos, small units of incomparable veterans sent to accomplish objectives that would have been impossible for conventional forces. And others kept their role closer to the Primarch, forming a wall of ceramite and will between their liege and any enemy who might hope to strike at the Crusade's greatest assets. The traditions varied enormously across the legions, reflecting the unique cultures that had grown up around each Primarch's personality and homeworld. The Space Wolves, under Leman Russ, developed what they called the Varagir, a word from the Fenrisian dialect meaning wolf guard. These were warriors hand-picked from the First Great Company, which was also called the On Company, the innermost circle of Russ's chosen. To earn a place among the Varagir, each warrior had to distinguish himself in battle repeatedly, not once, not twice, but over and over until his saga was worth the telling. They wore Cataphracti Terminator armor exclusively, as the heaviest and most protective personal warplate available, and they carried combi bolters and frost axes into battle. Their armor was covered in ornate ritual knotwork, designs that carried specific meaning within the Fenrisian warrior tradition, marking tactical specialities and accumulated honors in a visual language that any space wolf could read at a glance. But here is the detail about the Varagir. that reveals something profound about their role. When a warrior joined the Varagir, they were, in a sense, stepping back from the pursuit of personal glory. A wolf guard who stands at the Primarch's side does not lead charges. They do not seek out duels. They stand fast and wait, their fury held in check like water behind a dam until Russ points at something and releases them. As only then does that restrained fury come out, and the sources describe the charge of the Varagir as something terrible to see. A tide of armored giants driven by inhuman strength and ferocity, their momentum described as capable of crushing enemies before their blades even had time to strike. It's a fascinating tension. These are warriors defined by restraint who become, in the moment of unleashing, among the most violent forces in the entire crusade. Contrast this with how Lionel Johnson of the Dark Angels used his elite. The Lion's approach was considerably more flexible. His honor guards didn't always stand at his side. In fact, the Lion was known to send them out as independent strike forces, tasked with accomplishing specific objectives, while the Primarch handled the broader campaign. But this makes a certain sense given the Lion's character: methodical, strategic, always thinking several moves ahead, always viewing the battlefield as a system of interconnected problems rather than a single heroic confrontation. His guards were pieces on a board, exceptional pieces, but pieces nonetheless. This probably frustrated some of them. It's one of those quiet tensions that runs through Dark Angel's lore, like a hairline crack in armor. The sense that serving the Lion meant accepting that even your own considerable glory was subordinate to his larger plan. The Blood Angels developed what they called the First Sphere, within which the Sanguinary Guard were the most elite subset. These warriors gave up their former names when they entered the Guard's ranks, taking only the title of Seraph, yet deliberately erasing the individual identity beneath a shared purpose. They were Sanguinius's wrath, they were his stern resolve, they were his watchful eyes given form. The philosophy here is striking. By removing the personal name, the Guard were supposed to shed the psychological weight of personal ambition, personal fear, personal attachment, so that they could serve without hesitation, and without the hesitation that comes from thinking too much about one's own mortality. The Seraph exists to protect the great angel. The human beneath the golden armor, whatever their former name might have been, serves that purpose entirely and without reservation. Each of these traditions is distinct. Each reflects the specific combination of the Primarch's personality, the homeworld's culture, and the pragmatic demands of the kind of warfare each legion specialized in. And yet they all share something: the understanding that reaching this pinnacle is not just a military achievement, it is a transformation. The warrior who joins an honor guard isn't just getting a better assignment. They are becoming something qualitatively different, a living symbol of what their legion or chapter aspires to be. Rabut Guilliman's approach to his personal elite during the Great Crusade is particularly instructive, given what the Ultramarines would later become. The Ultramarines Legion was enormous, one of the largest of the 20 legions, and Guilliman managed it with the systematic efficiency of a mind that genuinely found strategic architecture beautiful. His personal guard reflected this: trained, organized, clear in their roles and relationships, exemplifying the disciplined virtue that Guilliman was simultaneously building into his broader legion. The warriors he chose to stand at his side were not the most flamboyant or the most individually brilliant. They were the most consistently excellent, the most reliable, the ones whose performance under pressure was not spectacular, but simply never failed. There is a difference between the warrior who achieves one extraordinary feat and the warrior who achieves a good feat every time they are called upon. And Guilliman's honor guards were emphatically from the second category. Rogel Dawn, of the Imperial Fists, organized his personal elite around the concept of absolute defensive capability. The Imperial Fists are famous for their siege warfare, their willingness to hold ground against odds that should be overwhelming, and their almost theological commitment to the principle that ground held is ground that will not be lost. Dawn's honor guard reflected this: warriors who could not be moved, who would stand precisely where they were placed, regardless of what the enemy threw at them, whose personal presence on a defensive line made that line stronger, not just through their individual combat power, but through the quality of their example. The warriors around them looked at the honor guard standing unmoved against some terrible tide and thought, if they're not leaving, neither am I. That morale effect was, in some engagements, worth more than the combat power the guard themselves provided. A Vulcan of the Salamanders, a Primarch whose deep personal care for humanity was a defining characteristic that shaped everything about his legion, chose warriors for his personal guard, who exemplified the Salamander's unique blend of martial excellence and genuine compassion. The Salamanders have always believed that the purpose of their extraordinary power is the protection of the people they serve, not the demonstration of that power for its own sake. Vulcan's honor guard were, accordingly, chosen partly for military excellence, but also for something harder to name: a quality of character, a warmth, a genuine care for the people around them that Vulcan felt was essential to what a Space Marine should be. In a setting where many of the superhuman warriors tend toward cold effectiveness, was this emphasis on character as a criterion for the most elite selection is distinctive and worth remembering. Then the Horus Heresy happened, and everything changed. The specifics of that catastrophic civil war are not our primary focus here, but its consequences for the honor guard tradition are worth considering. Many of the greatest guards of the Primarchs died during the heresy, some in the initial betrayals, some during the long and grinding years of civil war, some in the final desperate hours at the Siege of Terror. The Sanguinary Guard, as we'll explore in detail later, were almost entirely destroyed alongside their Primarch in those final moments. The Varagir survived, their traditions becoming the template for the Wolf Guard of the later Space Wolves chapter. The Deathwing of the Dark Angels carried forward their own secret burdens, traditions shaped by tragedy and shame as much as by glory. After the heresy came the second founding, the great division of the legions into chapters, and with it the codification of the Space Marine organizational structure in the Codex Astartes. The Honor Guard tradition survived this reorganization, preserved as part of a broader acknowledgement that some warriors simply transcend the standard structure. The Codex Astartes, for all its insistence on standardization, recognized that the needs of a chapter master, the protection of the individual who is, in many ways, the living incarnation of the chapter's will and memory, required something beyond what a standard command squad could provide. What emerged from this reorganization was the Honor Guard as we know it in the modern setting. Smaller than the great guards of the Primarchs inevitably, because the chapters themselves are smaller than the old legions ever were, but carrying the same essential quality, the same understanding that this is not just military duty, this is vocation, this is calling. This is what a Space Marine becomes when they have spent centuries earning the right to stand in the most sacred circle their organization possesses. Part 3. The Anatomy of Excellence, Roles within the Honor Guard. Now let's look more closely at the specific positions that make up a typical Honor Guard, because this isn't a homogeneous mass of identical warriors. It's a deliberate structure, with each role filling a specific function, and understanding the roles helps you understand the Guard as a whole. At the apex of the internal hierarchy of the Honor Guard, you find two figures who stand apart even from the rest of this extraordinary group. The first is the Chapter Champion. The Chapter Champion is the finest single combat warrior in the entire chapter. This isn't hyperbole or empty title. The Chapter Champion has been specifically selected, tested, trained, and refined to fulfill one specific purpose. The moment any enemy dares to challenge the Chapter Master to personal combat, the Chapter Champion steps forward in his place. This is a sacred duty and a point of deep honor. By accepting a challenge on the Chapter Master's behalf, the Champion takes upon himself the honor of the entire chapter. He is not fighting for himself, yet he is not fighting to demonstrate his personal prowess, though his personal prowess is obviously extraordinary. He is fighting as a representative and a shield, absorbing the threat of single combat, so that the Chapter Master can continue directing the larger battle without being drawn into personal confrontation. The training of a chapter champion is heavily oriented toward dueling, where a standard Space Marine learns a broad range of combat skills, firearms proficiency, squad tactics, vehicle operation, demolitions. The champion specializes in the blade and the body, studying personal combat with an intensity that most warriors would find obsessive. They study the fighting styles of enemy champions and warlords extensively. They develop an understanding not just of how to fight, but of how to read an opponent's intent before they act, just to find the gap in the technique before it's exploited, to win fights with efficiency rather than brute force. Though they have brute force in abundance, obviously, the relationship between the chapter champion and the chapter master is often one of the closest bonds in the chapter. These two warriors have typically spent years or decades fighting side by side, and that shared experience creates a kind of trust that goes deeper than formal military hierarchy. Champions are frequently described as advisors and confidants to their masters, the person the chapter master turns to when they need honest counsel from someone they know won't hedge or flatter. There's a story from the Invaders chapter that captures this beautifully. Captain Ravenger fell in battle, and his champion Braden held the company's position afterwards, fighting for solar hours and refusing to be driven back, eventually playing a decisive role in turning the tide. When the chapter masters convened to choose Ravenger's successor, Braden was the unanimous choice. He declined. He declared himself a warrior and a servant, not a leader, and pledged instead to protect whoever was appointed. The man who had just demonstrated the qualities needed to lead refused the command, because he understood that his function and his preference was to fight rather than to lead. That story tells you something real about the nature of the champion's role and the kind of person who fills it. The second key figure is the chapter ancient, or the standard bearer. The ancient is the warrior chosen to carry the chapter's banner into battle. This might sound ceremonial, much like the equivalent of a regimental flagman in a conventional military. The reality is much heavier than that. A chapter's banner is not a piece of cloth. It is one of the most sacred artifacts the chapter possesses. Each banner has been carried over hundreds of battlefields. Each one has absorbed, in whatever metaphysical sense the Warhammer setting uses, the memory and honor of every campaign that has been fought beneath it. The designs woven into the fabric are not random. They are specific, deliberate compositions of imagery and iconography that every Space Marine in the chapter can read and interpret, each detail carrying a precise reference to battles won and battles survived, and the names of the dead who are remembered by the living. Yes, the warrior chosen to carry this object into battle has been specifically selected for stubbornness and resilience, not just courage, stubbornness, the kind of refusal to yield that is almost pathological, because the standard bearer cannot drop the banner. They cannot retreat when the banner's loss would signal defeat to every soldier on the field. They hold it up regardless of what is happening to them personally, regardless of how many enemies are trying to remove it from their grip. Historically, the moments of greatest crisis for a chapter are often also the moments when the standard bearer's individual performance becomes decisive, the instant when the banner is almost lost and then retrieved, when the flag bearer is surrounded and still standing, when every soldier on the battlefield is looking at that banner rather than at the tactical situation and being reminded of who they are and what they fight for. There is the story of ancient Gallatin of the Ultramarines, which has become something of a legend across many chapters. Gallatin held his ground against overwhelming odds, refusing to die, holding the chapter banner high while everything around him disintegrated into chaos, somehow surviving long enough to rally those around him and turn what should have been a catastrophic defeat into something altogether more complex. The Imperial Fists have a similar story involving a warrior named Navarre, who recovered the chapter banner when it began to fall and carried it through a breach in the enemy's walls, at inspiring the assault that followed and earning himself the title of Captain of the Banner from the chapter master of the Imperial Fists himself. These stories exist because they're true in spirit. Standard bearers genuinely do perform this function. The banner is a psychological weapon as much as it is a symbol of tradition, Beyond the champion and the ancient, the rest of the honor guard consists of veteran warriors who have accumulated enough combat experience and enough honors to be considered worthy of the chapter master's direct retinue. These warriors wear some of the oldest and most magnificent armor in the chapter's entire arsenal, artificer armor, individually crafted and tended to with religious devotion by the chapter's tech marines. Each suit incorporating centuries of incremental improvements and repairs that have, paradoxically, made the armor both more reliable and more storied over time. Some of these suits have been worn by dozens of previous veterans, each of whom left something of themselves in the metal, a repaired breach from a particular battle, a modification made to address a recurring tactical need, an etched inscription recording a specific feat of arms. The weapons are similarly ancient, relic blades, power swords of extraordinary quality, plasma pistols of patterns that have long since ceased to be produced, pistols and bolters that have been loaded and fired so many times that the mechanisms have developed their own kind of weathered perfection. These aren't pieces of equipment. They are legacy objects, carrying the accumulated history of the warriors who carried them before. And the warrior who bears them today is carrying all of that history into battle alongside them. The honor guard typically deploys in close proximity to the chapter master, screening him from the worst of the enemy's fire, intercepting threats that might otherwise reach the command structure of the force, and providing a visible focal point around which the rest of the chapter's warriors can orient themselves during the chaos of engagement. They move with a deliberation that contrasts sharply with the more frenetic energy of the younger warriors around them. They've seen too much to be surprised. They've fought too long to panic. And there is something deeply reassuring about that quality, the calm at the center of the storm that says, very clearly and without words, that this situation, whatever it looks like, it is not the worst thing these warriors have faced, because it never is. The honor guard has always survived something worse. A word about how champions are chosen, because different chapters approach this differently, and the variation is itself illuminating. The most straightforward method is simple identification. The chapter's leadership observes warriors over time, notes who demonstrates the specific combination of qualities needed: extraordinary blade skill, psychological stability under the unique pressure of single combat, the ability to represent the chapter with appropriate gravitas, and makes a selection. This is the approach most codex-compliant chapters use. But some chapters do something more interesting. The Silver Skulls, for example, each use the visions of their prognosticars, psychers who specialize in reading the possible futures, to identify those who appear to be marked for the champion's role. The idea that destiny might designate a champion rather than the champion earning the role through conventional means sits in a fascinating tension with the meritocratic emphasis of most chapter traditions. But it also reflects a broader truth about the Silver Skulls. They navigate the galaxy through the lens of divination, and they see no reason why one of their most important positions should be exempt from that approach. The Imperial Fists use combat tournaments specifically to select new champions when a previous one has died in battle. These are not casual exhibitions. They are formal, are ritually significant competitions in which the finest warriors of the chapter test themselves against each other in structured bouts, the tournament proceeding until one warrior has demonstrated sufficient superiority to be acknowledged as the fittest candidate. This is transparently fair. There's no subjectivity, no political maneuvering, no favoritism that can go unexposed. Every warrior who participated saw the same fights. Everyone knows who won and who lost. The champion earns the title in full view of the chapter, and that public visibility is part of what gives the appointment its legitimacy. There is also something worth noting about what happens to a champion's armor after they fall. When a champion dies in battle and their body is recovered, their armor is not simply put back into the general armory for the next person to use. It is taken to the chapter's reliquaries and displayed there, every plate etched with a commemoration of the hero's victories. This is a form of institutional memory. The armor becomes a physical record of the champion's service, available for future generations to study, to draw inspiration from, to understand in a tangible way what the standard of their predecessors actually looked like. A chapter with centuries of champions behind it has a reliquary full of armor, telling the story of every warrior who held the position.
And honestly, this is the part of 40k lore that keeps pulling me back. Not the big battles, not the Primarchs, not the galaxy-ending threats. It's these quieter traditions, the idea that somewhere in a fortress monastery there's a warrior who has spent 200 years getting better at one specific thing, who turned down promotions, who chose to stand at someone else's side because they believed that was where they were needed most. The honor guard isn't loud, it doesn't need to be, and I think that's why every time I sit down to research a topic like this one, I end up spending 3 times longer than I planned, because the quieter corners of this setting are where the most interesting ideas are living. But anyways, let's go back to the video.
Each one contributing to the ongoing mythology of the role. The Cured pattern armor, named after a term for heroes from ancient Terran tradition, that champions typically wear, is itself worth a description. And it's a variant of standard power armor, but enhanced in specific ways that reflect the champion's particular needs. The shoulder guards are reinforced, both to display the many badges of honor a champion is entitled to wear, and to provide greater protection against the strikes that tend to come at the shoulder in personal combat, the area targeted when an opponent is trying to disarm. The breastplate is similarly reinforced, and typically bears the champion's personal heraldry, the winged shield that marks their role. The helm is fashioned to deliberately evoke the knightly helmets of Terra's ancient past, connecting the champion's role in the far future to the warrior traditions of a planet that was already ancient when the Space Marine program was conceived. The honor guard as a whole is overseen, in most chapters, just by a captain of this guard, an additional layer of command above the champion and the ancient. This captain manages the guard's day-to-day operations, their training, their deployment, their interaction with the chapter master's broader command structure. Occasionally, this captain has a guard sergeant as a second in command, though the position is often left vacant. The honor guard's seniority typically means that internal hierarchy beyond the most senior levels is somewhat redundant. These warriors have been leading and following and calibrating their relationships with authority for long enough that formal rank markers matter less to their function than they might in younger formations. There is no chapter in the Adeptus Astartes for whom the concept of the honor guard carries more formal, codified weight than the Ultramarines. What this is, when you think about it, almost inevitable. The Ultramarines are the chapter most closely associated with the Codex Astartes, the organizational framework that defines how most Space Marine chapters structure themselves. Their Primarch, Robert Guilliman, was the author of that codex, the meticulous, brilliant, relentlessly rational strategic mind who looked at the aftermath of the Horus heresy and decided that never again would the Imperium allow the kind of unchecked legion power that had enabled the catastrophe of civil war. He set down the rules, he codified the positions, and within his own chapter, the rules of the honor guard are followed with a particular kind of proud precision. The Ultramarines' honor guard, in the period before the Primaris Reformation, was built around a core of veteran Space Marines who had each faced nearly every enemy the galaxy could produce. When the lore says this, it means it quite literally. These warriors have fought Chaos Space Marines, Orcs, Eldar, Tyranids, Necrons, Tau, Dark Elder, and the full catalogue of other threats that populate the grimdark setting. Each encounter has added something to their understanding. The honor guard member who has spent decades fighting the followers of Chaos knows, in a granular and practical way, how corruption manifests in tactics, how cultists and traitors think, where the gaps in their devotion are. The same warrior who has spent time studying Tyranid combat patterns understands how a hive organism adapts and what it means when the adaptation seems to be going in a specific direction. This cumulative, broad tactical knowledge is part of what makes their advice, when they choose to give it, so valuable. In battle, the Ultramarines' honor guard has a specific and visually striking characteristic, the Axe of Ultramar. These are not standard pattern weapons. They are potent, beautifully crafted armaments constructed from a rare metal found on Prandium, a world of note in Ultramarines history. Each axe of Ultramar represents the craftsmanship of a chapter that takes the quality of its arms with the same seriousness that it takes the quality of its warriors. The axes are old. They carry the marks of previous bearers, and only the most courageous of the Ultramarines come close to earning the right to carry one, and even then, only some of them will actually achieve it. The specificity of that phrasing is important, yet it's not enough to be brave. Brave is the baseline for any Space Marine. You need to be brave in a specific way, to have demonstrated courage that stands out even in a culture saturated with extraordinary courage, to earn a place among those who carry the axes of Ultramar. The Ultramarines' Honor Guard is also responsible for the Banner of Macragge, one of the most sacred objects in the chapter's history, a standard that has been carried over battlefields stretching from one end of the sector to the other, and whose loss would be treated as a catastrophe comparable to the loss of an entire company. The chapter Ancient, who bears this banner in battle, carries a burden that is simultaneously physical and symbolic in a way that few other warrior traditions can quite match. As one of the most remarkable details about the Ultramarines' Honor Guard is the way it extends its commitment beyond the chapter's own walls. Ultramarines' Honor Guard members have been seconded to the Death Watch, the elite kill team organization that draws from all Space Marine chapters to fight the most dangerous Xenos threats. When an Ultramarines' Honor Guard takes the Apocryphal Oath and joins the Death Watch for what is sometimes a single operation, and sometimes a deployment lasting months, years, or even decades, they carry with them the full weight of their chapter's tradition. Specifically, when the Death Watch is facing an enemy that is a figure of particular significance to the Ultramarines, perhaps a Tyranid strain that the chapter has fought before, or a Chaos warband that has taken worlds close to Ultramar, the Ultramarines may dispatch not just a standard detachment but a squad formed from their Honor Guard. The message is clear. This threat matters enough that the chapter is sending its absolute best. The oath these warriors take when joining the Death Watch is described as binding not only on the individual warrior, but on the honor of every Ultramarines battle brother. This is a significant distinction. When most Space Marines take the Apocryphal Oath, they are pledging their own service and their own combat effectiveness. When an Ultramarines Honor Guard member takes it, they take it as a representative of the entire chapter. The gravity of that responsibility is apparently, though one of the reasons that selection for Death Watch service from the Honor Guard is treated as a very specific and considered decision rather than a routine deployment. What happens to individual members of the Ultramarines Honor Guard over the centuries of their service is, in microcosm, a kind of history of the chapter's relationship with the galaxy's horrors. Commander of the Guard, Aloysius, is perhaps the most cited example, the warrior who sacrificed his life at Cold Steel Ridge during the battle for Macragge, standing alone against the Swarmlord and its attending tyrant guard. The Swarmlord is not a creature that any individual warrior should be able to delay. It is among the most powerful bioweapons the Tyranid hive mind has ever produced, a being of terrible intelligence and terrible violence, specifically engineered to hunt and destroy Space Marine commanders. Aloysius held it. He held it long enough for Marneus Calgar, gravely wounded, to be evacuated from the battlefield, and then he died. This kind of sacrifice is not unusual in Honor Guard history. It is, in a sense, the defining event type of the tradition, the moment when the Guard's purpose crystallizes from abstract duty into specific physical consequence. The Honor Guard exists so that the chapter master can continue leading. Sometimes the cost of that continuation is everything. What makes Aloysius's sacrifice particularly significant, beyond the tactical reality of what he accomplished, is what it says about the quality of decision-making required of Honor Guard warriors in critical moments. Aloysius didn't have time to receive orders. He didn't have time to consult his chapter master, or calculate odds, or assess the strategic situation with the calm rationality that the Ultramarines are famous for. He had time to see the threat, understand what it meant, and put himself between it and the person he was sworn to protect. The centuries of training and experience that the honor guard accumulates over their careers are precisely the preparation for this kind of instant, total commitment. The deep competence that means the right action is available without deliberation. The psychological steadiness that means fear doesn't get in the way of doing what needs to be done. The battle for Macragge that claimed Aloysius was itself one of the most catastrophic events in Ultramarines history, the tyrannid invasion of the system that came close to destroying the chapter entirely. As is that this is where the Honor Guard's tradition provides one of its most vivid demonstrations of purpose, feels appropriate. The worst situations are where the Guard's qualities matter most. Any formation looks good when the battle is going well. What distinguishes the Honor Guard is what they do when everything has gone badly. There's also the question of how Marneus Calgar himself, Chapter Master, one of the most powerful individual warriors in the Imperium, a man who has been described as possessing more raw martial power than most beings who walk the galaxy, relates to the warriors who protect him. Calgar is not someone who needs bodyguards in the conventional sense. He can take care of himself against most threats the galaxy produces. The Honor Guard who surround him are not there because he can't fight, as they're there because the chapter has decided that his survival matters too much to be left to chance, that the multiplication of exceptional capability around him gives the Imperium the best possible chance of keeping him in the fight when the fight matters most. Calgar's relationship with his Victrix Guard is, accordingly, one of mutual respect between exceptional warriors rather than the relatively simpler relationship between protector and protected. When the Victrix Guard accompany him into battle, they are not his shield in the sense that he hides behind them. They fight alongside him, complementing his ability, covering the angles he can't cover, maintaining the chapter master's ability to direct the broader battle, while simultaneously providing an immediate defensive capability that protects against the specific threats that leadership positions tend to attract. Then came the era Indomitus and Guilliman's return, and with it the Primaris Space Marines and the Ultramarines Honor Guard evolved in a way that is still being worked out in the current lore. The Victrix Honor Guard emerged as an elite subset, an elite within an elite, formed initially as an ad hoc unit accompanying Guilliman during the Terran Crusade. The Victrix were drawn specifically from Primaris Space Marines, who had already served in the Honor Guard, making them a kind of second screening of an already extraordinarily selective process. What makes the Victrix unique is just beyond the obvious fact of their exceptional quality is the specific virtue that Guilliman prizes in selecting them. It's not purely martial excellence, though their martial excellence is extraordinary. It's selflessness, the ability to cast aside personal glory entirely to ensure that the chapter achieves victory. Guilliman, the architect of the Codex Astartes, the Primarch who rebuilt the Imperium at the Second Founding, the Lord Commander Resurgent of the era Indomitus, has strong and specific views about what makes an exceptional warrior, and at the top of that list is the willingness to subordinate personal ambition to collective success. The Victrix Guard are led by Captain Cato Sicarius, which is a deeply ironic assignment for anyone who knows Sicarius's reputation. Sicarius is one of the most flamboyant, self-promoting, glory-seeking individuals in the entire chapter, a warrior whose martial brilliance is matched only by his appetite for recognition. And yet Guilliman chose him to lead warriors defined by selflessness. Whether this represents a deliberate attempt to temper Sicarius's personality, a recognition that personal glory-seeking and tactical selflessness can coexist in a sufficiently disciplined warrior, or something more subtle about what Guilliman sees in Sicarius that others might miss, is left open in the lore, but it's a pairing that rewards thinking about. The specific examples of Victrix Guard members whose names don't appear in Imperial history books, but without whom crucial operations would have failed, are some of the most quietly affecting details in the Ultramarines supplement lore. Isauros Praenon, Trismerus Gerorian, Osmovio Terilis. These are not names celebrated across the Imperium. Most people who have read extensively about the Ultramarines might never have encountered them, but without their sacrifices, Corpus Helix, the Ultramarines' chief apothecary, might have failed to evacuate vital gene seed from Ciatara before it was overrun. Trismeris Gerorian died helping chaplain Ortan Cassius prevent the fall of Agnuna to a Genestealer cult and its patriarch. Morvio Tarilis gave his life, ensuring that Master of the Forge, Phineas Maxim, could reach broken void shield generators in time to prevent the destruction of the battle barge Severian. The Victrix Guard make the Imperium work not through spectacular individual glory, but through the patient, deliberate, a selfless application of exceptional ability to exactly the places where exceptional ability is needed most. They are, in this sense, the purest possible expression of what Guilliman has always believed the Adeptus Astartes should be. Part 5. The Burning Ones, the sanguinary guard of the Blood Angels. If the Ultramarines' Honor Guard represents the rational, codified, disciplined expression of the Honor Guard tradition, then the Blood Angels' Sanguinary Guard represents something else entirely, something older, more primal, drenched in the particular flavor of tragedy and beauty that clings to everything the Blood Angels do. The Sanguinary Guard is, depending on how you look at it, as either the oldest continuous Honor Guard tradition in the Adeptus Astartes, or a complete reinvention of the concept carried out in the immediate aftermath of the most traumatic single event in the Blood Angels' long and painful history. Both of these things are simultaneously true, and the tension between them is part of what makes the Sanguinary Guard so compelling. Their proper name, during the Great Crusade, was the Ikisat. Translated literally from the archaic dialect in which it's recorded, Ikisat means roughly the Burning Ones. The name reflects their ardor, the absolute consuming devotion to Sanguinius that defined their existence from the moment they were selected to join the First Sphere. They were the most renowned warriors of the Orders of the First Sphere, which also included the Crimson Paladins, the Burning Eyes, and the Angels' Tears, an entire tier of the Blood Angels Legion devoted to direct service to Sanguinius. But the Ikisat were the innermost ring of that devotion. They were chosen not just for martial excellence, but for something harder to quantify: unwavering devotion, the capacity to serve without hesitation, without the friction of personal ambition or personal fear getting between the warrior and their duty. When they were inducted into the Guard's ranks, they surrendered their former names and took only the title of Seraph. This was not symbolic. It was a genuine attempt to dissolve the individual into the role, to create warriors who existed entirely in service to the great angel, unburdened by the psychological weight of personal identity. In this erasure of the self, there is something both beautiful and deeply unsettling. It was beautiful because it represents total commitment, a purity of purpose that most warriors can only aspire to. Unsettling because the cost of that purity is the individual's own story, their own name, their own claim to a particular kind of personhood. The Seraph is not Trooper Marcus or Sergeant Valdis or Battle Brother Erethan any longer. The Seraph is simply the Seraph, defined entirely by the duty they carry. They served Sanguinius throughout the Great Crusade, with distinction that stands out even in a legion not exactly known for underachievement. On some campaigns, they were assigned to protect other high-ranking members of the Blood Angels, a mark of particular trust. Sanguinius was essentially lending some of his personal protection to commanders who had earned that distinction. In battle, their golden armor gleamed like a second sun. Their artificer plate worked to a standard of craftsmanship that made it simultaneously protective and exquisitely beautiful. Each suit of armor the Sanguinary Guard wore was a relic of the chapter, one of a small number of surviving suits from the time of the Great Crusade, whose precise manufacturing methods have long since been lost. In a setting where information tends to decay over millennia, the fact that these suits survive at all is remarkable. The fact that they still work is testament to the care with which they have been maintained. Then came the Siege of Terror. Sanguinius's prescience, that terrible, curse-like gift for seeing the shape of things to come, told him, as it had told him for some time, that he would not survive what was coming. He could see his own death. And he chose to walk toward it anyway, because the alternative was allowing Horus's victory, and that he would not permit. When he went aboard the vengeful spirit in those final hours, he brought almost all of the sanguinary guard with him. Almost all of them died in the corridors of that ship, fighting their way toward Horus's throne room through warp-spawned nightmares and traitor warriors, giving their lives by ones and twos and small groups to clear a path for their Primarch that ultimately couldn't save him. Only one survived the heresy, Azkaelon, the herald of the Primarch, the leader of the Sanguinary Guard. He survived because Sanguinius, knowing what was coming, had insisted he remain behind. In the lore, as this is described as Sanguinius ensuring that the legacy of the Guard would not be entirely extinguished, but there is something achingly personal in it too. As Azkaelon had wanted to fight at his Primarch's side one final time, he had pleaded in whatever way a seraph pleads, and Sanguinius had refused him that because the Guard's survival mattered more than either of them. The weight of that decision on Azkaelon is almost impossible to imagine. He survived because he was ordered to. He watched his brothers go to their deaths. He watched his Primarch go to his death. And then, in the aftermath, he had to pick up whatever pieces remained and begin the work of rebuilding, because that was the duty that had been placed on him, and the Seraphs do not abandon their duty. It was largely through Azkaelon's efforts that the legacy of the Sanguinary Guard survived into the Blood Angels of the modern era, and spread through the Sanguinary Brotherhood, every Blood Angel's successor chapter that traces its lineage back to those dark days of the heresy. In each of these chapters, some form of the Sanguinary Guard exists, keeping alive a tradition that was almost killed 10,000 years ago on a ship surrounded by the stench of corruption and the dying screams of angels. In the current era, the Sanguinary Guard serves as the Blood Angels' version of the chapter Honor Guard, but elevated by the particular mythology of their chapter into something that functions simultaneously as an elite military unit and as a religious institution. To join the Sanguinary Guard is explicitly not merely an honor. The lore says this clearly. It is to enter a brotherhood of mortals become gods, to continue a legend 10,000 years old. The criteria for selection into the modern Sanguinary Guard are themselves worth exploring, because they illuminate the specific qualities that the Blood Angels most deeply value. Pure martial excellence is necessary, but insufficient. Every veteran in the Blood Angels' first company is martially excellent. What distinguishes the Sanguinary Guard candidate is something harder to define and harder to test: the degree to which they have not just mastered, but embodied the values of Sanguinius, the nobility, the compassion, yes, compassion, even in warriors bred for war, that the great angel showed toward those he protected. The refusal to be diminished by the red thirst or consumed by the black rage, and not through the absence of these hereditary afflictions, but through the discipline to contain them, to channel their energy without being controlled by it. The red thirst and the black rage deserve a moment's consideration here, because they are integral to understanding what it means to be a Blood Angel of exceptional quality. The red thirst is a constant, subtle pull toward violence and the taste of blood, a genetic curse traced back to the psychic trauma of Sanguinius's death that has been built into every Blood Angel and their successor chapter successors since. Most Blood Angels manage this through ritual, through the ceremonies the chapter has developed over 10,000 years, specifically to provide structured outlets for the thirst. But managing it is work. It is a discipline that requires ongoing effort. As an interior battle that runs beneath every exterior battle the Blood Angels fight, the Sanguinary Guard, to have earned their place, have demonstrated that they can manage the thirst with a consistency and a grace that makes them reliable even in the worst possible circumstances. Surrounded by blood and death and the full horror of close combat, with everything conspiring to feed the hereditary hunger. The black rage is darker and more final. When a Blood Angel succumbs to the black rage, they experience Sanguinius's final moments as if those moments were happening to them in the present. The rage, the pain, the desperate fury of the last stand against Horus. Warriors consumed by the black rage are placed in the Death Company, given red armor to mark their madness, and deployed against the most desperate objectives? Was their uncontrollable ferocity turned against enemies that need to be destroyed regardless of cost? They generally don't survive. For a sanguinary guard warrior, the prospect of the Black Rage is a specific kind of dread. The recognition that even the most exceptional of the Blood Angels can eventually be claimed by the curse that haunts the chapter's genetic line. That they go into battle carrying this knowledge and still carry themselves with the grace and discipline the role demands is itself a form of heroism. Their equipment reinforces this status. Their armor is the surviving suits from the Great Crusade, maintained with obsessive care, each plate repaired and tended to with a devotion that approaches the sacred. The weapons they carry are Angelus pattern bolters, wrist-mounted, leaving the hands free, and encarmine swords, master-crafted power weapons of extraordinary quality. The jump packs they wear are both practical instruments of war and deliberate visual echoes of the wings of Sanguinius himself, the great angel who defined everything the Blood Angels aspire to be. When the Sanguinary Guard deploy, they don't descend on their enemies. They fall from the sky like divine judgment, gold against the grey skies of whatever world they happen to be fighting on. Wings spread, blades drawn, screaming not from fear, but from the release of a fury that is otherwise kept under iron control. The deeds of each member of the Sanguinary Guard are recorded with reverent diligence. At the great feast days of the Blood Angels, those rare and precious occasions when the entire chapter gathers together, the Guard's deeds are recounted aloud, as delivered by battle-steep veterans to the assembled chapter, from the youngest scouts to the most ancient warriors. This is not merely tradition, it is a form of theology. The Sanguinary Guard, in the Blood Angels' understanding of their own history and purpose, are the living continuation of Sanguinius's legacy, not just his military capability, but his nobility, his courage, his refusal to yield even in the face of certain death. The Sanguinary Ancient, the standard-bearer of the Sanguinary Guard, occupies a specific position within the formation. Unlike most chapter ancients, who hold their appointment permanently until death or extraordinary circumstance, the Sanguinary Ancient is chosen anew before each conflict by a council of peers. As this is a deliberate design choice that reflects something specific about Blood Angels' culture, the understanding that honor, particularly in its most visible manifestation, should be actively earned rather than inherited. The warrior designated to bear the standard for a particular campaign is the warrior his peers have judged most worthy of that distinction right now, in the current moment, based on their understanding of that warrior's recent performance and current state. It's a form of rotating trust that keeps the role vital rather than ceremonial. The devastation of Baal added another layer of tragedy to this already heavy history. When Hive Fleet Leviathan descended on Baal in the final years of the 41st Millennium, the Sanguinary Guard faced what seemed like annihilation for the second time in their existence. What the Tyrannid onslaught was of a scale that left almost no one standing. In the aftermath of the battle, the blood-soaked, terrible aftermath, only a single member of the Sanguinary Guard survived. His name was Coreus, one warrior. Out of an entire elite formation with 10,000 years of continuous history, one. The Guard was rebuilt in the wake of Guilliman's Indomitus crusade, with surviving veterans and Primaris Space Marines of Blood Angels heritage who arrived with the Crusade fleet. New Seraphs were inducted. New suits of armor were reverently commissioned where the ancient originals had been destroyed. The tradition continued, as traditions in the Blood Angels somehow always managed to continue, because the alternative, abandoning the thing that connects them to Sanguinius, is genuinely unthinkable. Part 6, The Ice and the Fury. Wolfguard of the Space Wolves. The Space Wolves have never done anything quite the way anyone else does it. This is, depending on your perspective, either their greatest strength or an ongoing irritant, and possibly both simultaneously. Their approach to the Honor Guard tradition is no different. It shares the essential purpose of the broader concept, but expresses it in a way that could only have emerged from the particular strangeness of Fenrisian culture, blended with the volcanic personality of Leman Russ. The Wolf Guard, as they're known in the modern chapter, trace their lineage directly to the Varagir of the Great Crusade, the elite warriors who served as Russ's personal honor guard, and close companions in both war and council. The Varagir were, as we touched on earlier, as cataphracticity Terminator-clad veterans of immense experience, warriors who had earned their place not through seniority or through being in the right place at the right time, but through deeds. Genuine, verifiable, remarkable deeds that had distinguished them from a legion that was already composed entirely of remarkable individuals. This emphasis on deed over seniority is the central innovation that sets the Space Wolves' approach apart from most of their peers. In a Codex-compliant chapter, the pathway to the Honor Guard runs primarily through time, through the slow accumulation of campaigns and honors, through the eventual recognition that a veteran has given enough years and shed enough blood to merit the distinction. The Space Wolves have always found this insufficient. For the Sons of Russ, what matters is not how long you have served, but what you have done. A Blood Claw, the most junior classification of Space Wolf warrior, has the same theoretical chance of joining the Wolf Guard as a Longfang who has been fighting for 2 centuries. What bridges the gap is not age, but performance. The deed that is extraordinary enough to catch a Wolf Lord's attention, that makes him look at a warrior and think, this one, I want this one at my side. This creates a fascinating social dynamic within the great companies. The Wolf Guard, the chapter's honor elite, contains a genuine mix of veterans with centuries of experience and occasional warriors who are functionally still adolescent by Astartes standards, elevated to the Guard's ranks almost directly out of their earliest combat experience because they did something so extraordinary that it couldn't be ignored. Ragnar Blackmane is perhaps the most famous example. Elevated from the Bloodclaws to Beric Thunderfist's Wolf Guard without even passing through the Grey Hunter's rank, after he killed an Orc warlord named Borzag Khan in direct combat and then dispatched the warlord's retinue of Orc nobs one after another. The youngest Wolf Lord in the chapter's history was, before his elevation to that rank, a Wolf Guard who had bypassed the usual path entirely. In battle, and the Wolf Guard serve multiple functions that are more diverse than the typical Honor Guard deployment. Yes, they protect their Wolf Lord. Yes, they form an elite bodyguard whose quality is immediately apparent to anyone with the experience to read a battlefield. But they are also, frequently, dispersed among the other packs of the Great Company, serving as pack leaders for groups of younger warriors, applying their experience and authority to elevate the performance of the units they join. This is unusual. Most Honor Guard traditions keep the elite together, concentrated around the commander, not dispersed throughout the broader force. The Space Wolves spread their excellence around more deliberately, treating the Wolf Guard not just as a shield for the Wolf Lord, but as a leavening force for the whole company. But there are specific subtypes within the Wolf Guard that are worth noting. The Wolf Guard battle leaders are those Wolf Guard members who have been judged by their Wolf Lord as natural commanders, warriors whose dominance and charisma makes them effective leaders of larger strike forces. These individuals can be given command of entire elements of the Great Company in the Wolf Lord's absence, acting as his voice and his arm. This is not a position that conflicts with the overall nature of the Wolf Guard. It's an extension of it, a recognition that the qualities that make a warrior exceptional in combat also, sometimes, make them exceptional at directing the combat of others. Then there are the Void Claws, those Wolf Guard who have specialized in the brutal close-quarters nightmare of boarding actions. As Logan Grimnar's own Great Company maintains this formation, and they are led by Torfin Daggerfist, a warrior whose name suggests he has long since stopped needing conventional reasons to enjoy fighting in the cramped corridors of enemy ships. The Void Claws exemplify a characteristic approach. Take the basic qualities of the Wolf Guard, exceptional personal combat ability, initiative, the willingness to wade into any situation regardless of odds, and focus them into the specific environment where those qualities generate maximum results. Perhaps the most famous individual wolf guard in the chapter's recent history is Arjak Rockfist. His story is remarkable for several reasons, not least because his path to the wolf guard was so unusual. Arjak Rockfist was a blacksmith before he was a space wolf, a craftsman from the Bearclaw tribe of Fenris, whose true gifts revealed themselves not at the forge, but in the killing field. He eventually became the personal champion of Logan Grimner himself, the great wolf of the chapter. His battlefield presence is the kind that becomes the stuff of heroic saga almost immediately. A warrior of such immense personal power that even by the extraordinary standards of the Wolf Guard, he stands apart. There is something essentially Fenrisian about the Wolf Guard that is hard to articulate precisely but easy to recognize. The Space Wolves are a chapter that never quite bought the Codex Astartes' insistence on standardization and impersonal hierarchy. They never forgot that they are, at some level, as a warrior culture that values individual saga and the bonds forged between warriors through shared experience. The Wolf Guard is not just a military formation to the Sons of Russ. It is the pack at its most concentrated, the closest circle of loyalty around the Wolf Lord, the companions who have earned their place through deeds that the Skalds will still be singing about when the ice of Fenris has swallowed another generation. Part 7. Secrets in Bone, White, the Deathwing, and the Dark Angel's inner circle. The Dark Angels do nothing without 3 layers of meaning. Their heraldry carries codes that only the initiated can read. Their rituals contain references that the lower-ranking members of the chapter participate in without understanding why. Their very organizational structure contains secrets within secrets, circles within circles, a progression of revelation that ensures no one knows more than they need to know at any given rank. In this context, it should surprise exactly no one that their honor guard equivalent, the Deathwing, is the most complicated, most history-saturated, and most philosophically heavy expression of the elite warrior tradition anywhere in the Adeptus Astartes. The Deathwing is the first company of the Dark Angels chapter, and it shares with most first companies the status of being the chapter's elite veterans. Unlike most first companies, however, the Deathwing has been transformed by the specific history of the Dark Angels into something that functions simultaneously as a military formation, an institutional secret keeper, and a ritual brotherhood with obligations that extend far beyond the normal scope of a Space Marine company. The origins of the Deathwing's distinctive bone-white armor are worth examining in some detail, because they reveal something important about how the Dark Angels process their own history. Before the events on a specific recruiting world, and there are multiple versions of this story in the lore, each slightly different in detail but consistent in essential meaning, the first company fought in the standard dark green of the chapter. What changed it was an act of extraordinary courage in impossible odds. A single squad of Deathwing Terminators found themselves facing a Genestealer infestation on a world that was deeply important to the chapter, a recruitment world and the homeworld of some of the company's own members. And the odds were, by any rational calculation, unsurvivable. The Terminators painted their armor white in preparation for their deaths, performing the death ritual of their people, marking themselves as warriors who had accepted that they would not return. They survived. They cleared the infestation. They killed the Broodlord that had made a horror of what had been their home, and in honor of that impossible victory purchased with the full expectation of death, the Dark Angels chapter decreed that the first company would wear white, bone white, to be specific, forever, not as a celebration, but as a remembrance, not of glory, but of sacrifice. The difference matters. The bone white of the Deathwing is not triumphant, it is memorial. This context, an institution built on the memory of near-total sacrifice, is carrying the weight of the chapter's darkest history, shapes everything about how the Deathwing functions. To become a member of the Deathwing is to ascend to the first company, which is itself the prerequisite for eventual admission to the inner circle, the shadowy governing body that guards the chapter's most terrible secret. The secret, of course, is the existence of the Fallen, those members of the original Dark Angels Legion who turned traitor during the heresy and have been hunted by the Unforgiven ever since. Only the Deathwing and senior officers know this secret within the broader chapter, and within the Deathwing, further circles of revelation exist, each step accompanied by new rituals, new oaths, and new truths about the chapter's history that the previous level of initiation had not included. Was the effect of this structure on the Deathwing's character as a military unit is profound and somewhat paradoxical. These are warriors who have been entrusted with the most sensitive information in the chapter, warriors who have demonstrated the loyalty and discretion to bear that knowledge without being destroyed by it. This process of gradual revelation and the testing it implies means that by the time a warrior has earned full initiation into the inner circle, they have been observed, assessed, and evaluated more thoroughly than perhaps any other military formation can match. The Dark Angels know, with as much certainty as 10,000 years of institutional tradition can provide, that the warriors in their inner circle are genuinely trustworthy. The Deathwing deploy in Terminator armor, the massive, supremely protective suits that are the most formidable personal warplate produced by the Imperium. Each suit carries the chapter's finest protective technology and enough weapons to reduce almost any opponent to component parts. When the Deathwing arrive on a battlefield, typically via teleportation, that characteristically direct and theatrical insertion that places them exactly where they're needed most, the enemy tends to notice. There is something specific about the appearance of bone-white Terminators that generates a particular quality of dread. The Deathwing have been doing this for a very long time. They know how to arrive at the most demoralizing possible moment. They also form honor guards for the chapter's high-ranking inner circle members in specific circumstances, librarians, interrogator chaplains. There are other senior figures whose missions or ritual functions require a close escort of Deathwing warriors. In these configurations, the Deathwing are performing the classic honor guard function in a very concentrated way, placing the chapter's finest warriors directly between its most important leaders and whatever threat the current situation presents. And then, in the current era of the lore, something genuinely strange and new entered the picture: the Inner Circle Companions. The Companions appeared after Lionel Johnson, the Dark Angel's Primarch, returned to the galaxy, a return that is itself one of the most quietly extraordinary developments in recent 40K lore. The Companions are mysterious even by Dark Angel's standards. They wield Calibanite greatswords, weapons whose name invokes the homeworld of the chapter. It's the destroyed planet Caliban that was lost in the final hours of the heresy, and they act as bodyguards for the chapter's mightiest heroes. But who they are, where they came from, how they decide which Dark Angels to protect, is unknown even to chapter masters of the Unforgiven. They fight in absolute silence, communicating with each other only through heavily encrypted channels in a coded language that only they understand. There is speculation, contained entirely in whispers and rumor even within the lore itself, that the Lion is involved in the Companions' existence. If he knows their identities, he isn't sharing the information. And in a chapter defined by secrets, an honor guard whose own identity is itself a secret from the chapter leadership is a remarkable thing. But it represents either the ultimate expression of the Dark Angel's tradition of circles within circles, or something new and stranger still, imported by the Primarch's return, along with whatever else the Lion brought back with him from wherever he spent the millennia of his disappearance. Part 8. The Sword and the Vision. Emperor's Champions of the Black Templars. There is no other honor guard tradition in the Adeptus Astartes that begins as dramatically or that carries as specific a theological weight as the Emperor's Champion of the Black Templars. Where most honor guard traditions are rooted in institutional recognition of accumulated excellence, you've served long enough and distinguished yourself sufficiently that you've earned a place in this elite cadre. The Emperor's Champion enters their role through something that doesn't fit into any conventional understanding of military selection at all. They are called. On the eve of battle, Black Templars warriors fast and pray. This is not unique to the Templars. Space Marine chapters observe ritual preparations of various kinds before significant engagements. What is unique is what can happen during those preparations. On extremely rare occasions, A battle brother may be seized by something that the Templars describe as divine vision. A state of absolute transcendent certainty descends on the warrior, accompanied by visions of the past that seem to reach all the way back to the Siege of Terror, to the moment 10,000 years ago when first Captain Sigismund stood in the ruins of the Imperial Palace and challenged any champion of chaos to face him in single combat. The warrior experiencing these visions knows, with a certainty that needs no rational justification, that he must take up the mantle of the Emperor's champion. He presents himself to the chaplains. They hear his confession, assess the nature of his vision and his spiritual state, and if they judge him genuinely called rather than merely ambitious, they anoint him the Emperor's champion. He is then equipped with the armor of faith, a set of power armor of extraordinary quality, and the black sword, a weapon of particular significance in Templar tradition. And then he leads his brothers into battle, seeking out the enemy's greatest champions and warlords for the same reason Sigismund sought them out 10,000 years ago, because the Emperor's enemies should be answered by the Emperor's finest. The precedent for all of this is Sigismund himself, and it's worth spending time with him, because his story is one of the most genuinely compelling origin stories in the entire 40K setting. He was the first captain of the Imperial Fist's Legion, the right hand of Primarch Rogal Dorn, described by Sanguinius himself in terms that suggest he was something fundamentally unusual, even among the extraordinary warriors of the Legiones Astartes. Sanguinius, who had a gift for seeing the truth beneath the surface of things, is recorded as saying of Sigismund that he seemed less my brother Dorn's champion, utter more deaths himself. This is extraordinary praise from a Primarch, and it conveys something specific about Sigismund's quality, not just that he was a superb fighter, but that fighting was, in some essential way, what he was for. Death in service to the Emperor, endless and implacable. His path to becoming the first Emperor's champion involved his own spiritual crisis during the lead-up to the heresy, his encounter with Euphrates Keeler, and the faith that had begun to crystallize around the concept of the Emperor as God, and a period in which his relationship with Rogal Dorn was severely strained by choices that his Primarch found incomprehensible. Dorn, the hard-headed pragmatist, found Sigismund's increasingly religious orientation bewildering and eventually infuriating, but he publicly denounced Sigismund as no true imperial fist, a secret shame that Sigismund carried through the rest of the heresy. And then came the Siege of Terror itself, and Rogal Dorn needed his finest warrior to do something specific. The palace was besieged. Chaos champions were walking among the traitors, figures of terrible power who were killing Imperial soldiers and demoralizing the defenders. Someone had to step forward and answer them in kind, to challenge them to single combat, to kill them publicly, to demonstrate to every defender watching that the servants of the Emperor had heroes of their own. Dorn chose Sigismund. He gave him the best armor and weapons the Legion possessed. He changed his heraldry to black to mark him as serving the Emperor directly. And Sigismund walked out among the ruins of the greatest city in human history and challenged everything that came against him. He won, every time. He dueled Chaos champions of extraordinary power and killed them, one after another, until his name became something that even the enemy heard and noted. Not with fear exactly. The champions of chaos are not frightened of death in the conventional sense, but with a recognition that this warrior was something specific. This was the Emperor's sword, given human form and set loose in the ruins. After the heresy, Sigismund became the founding High Marshal of the Black Templars chapter. His personal heraldry, black and white, became the chapter's colours. His tradition of the Emperor's champion was maintained, as enshrined in the chapter's holy texts, as a practice that honoured his memory and maintained the line of warrior devotion he had established. And something stranger than tradition may have been maintained too. The Black Templars believe that when a battle brother receives the visions that call him to be Emperor's champion, what he sees is the memories of Sigismund himself. Not a general sense of martial inspiration, but the specific experience of that specific warrior in that specific moment, reaching forward through 10,000 years of time to find a worthy inheritor. The weapons and armor of the Emperor's champion are treated as sacred relics. The Black Sword, specifically, is one of the most powerful close combat weapons in the chapter's arsenal. It's a master-crafted instrument designed explicitly for the champion's role of seeking out and destroying enemy champions and warlords. The Armor of Faith provides protection beyond standard power armor specifications. Together, they transform the champion into a walking statement of theological intent. This is what the Emperor's warriors look like when they are fully committed to his service. The 4 vows that the Emperor's champion leads the Templars in renewing before battle are each a statement of absolute commitment to refuse mercy to the unclean, to uphold the Emperor's honor without reservation, to reject and destroy anything touched by sorcery, and to accept any challenge regardless of the odds. These are not modest pledges. They represent a complete subordination of personal survival calculations to religious duty, as the warrior's life placed entirely at the service of a set of principles that admit of no compromise. The Black Templars have maintained this tradition for 10,000 years without a single interruption. Through every Black Crusade, every Tyranid invasion, every Orc warfront, every episode of internal crisis, there has always been a warrior who heard the call and answered it. The tradition requires this. The Templars' theological framework insists on the Emperor's continued active involvement in their service, not as a metaphor, not as institutional inspiration, but as a literal, ongoing relationship in which he reaches out and selects his champions directly. Whether that claim is true in any literal sense is, of course, one of those questions that the Warhammer setting is far too sophisticated to answer definitively. What matters for our purposes is that the warriors who receive these visions believe they are called, and they go into battle with the absolute commitment of someone who has been chosen by something larger than themselves. That quality, the utter fearlessness that comes from believing your service has divine sanction, is itself a kind of weapon. Part 9. New Legends, Ancient Duties. The Blade Guard veterans, the Primaris Space Marines, arrived in the galaxy like a stone thrown into still water, and the ripples from their appearance are still spreading outward through every aspect of Astartes' culture and organization. In the context of the Honor Guard tradition, the arrival of the Primaris raised a question that needed answering. What does the classic Honor Guard look like in the era of enhanced, physically superior Primaris warriors? And how does the tradition evolve without losing what made it distinctive and meaningful? The answer, for many chapters, came in the form of the Blade Guard veterans. The Blade Guard veterans are described as Primaris Marines who have earned the right to serve in the elite First Company, either in chapters raised entirely from Primaris stock during the Ultima founding, in the First Company of existing chapters alongside their firstborn brothers, or as already veteran Marines who have crossed the Rubicon Primaris. They are melee-focused warriors, advancing into battle with their blades held high, in a manner that explicitly invokes the imagery of knightly warriors from humanity's ancient past, a deliberate visual and philosophical connection to the tradition of the warrior protector, the champion who stands between the vulnerable and the threat. Whilst their armor is extraordinary, in an organization where even standard power armor is an engineering marvel, the Blade Guard wear suits covered with seals of purity, adorned with victory icons and heraldic devices, richly ornamented with the accumulated symbols of a warrior's service. The armor comes from the chapter's reliquaries during wartime. It's not kept in storage simply because it's impressive looking. It's kept because it represents the chapter's history, and bringing it out for battle is a statement that this engagement is significant enough to deserve its presence. Each warrior who puts on that armor when it's taken out of the reliquary is reminded explicitly of the legacy they've sworn to uphold. The armor is, in a sense, issuing a challenge. You wear this, now match what it represents. Thus, their storm shields deserve specific attention. These are not the standard personal shields used by other Space Marine assault formations. They are massive, personally crafted defensive instruments, each one the product of entire generations of chapter serfs, the non-Astartes support personnel whose labor sustains the chapter's daily existence. working to produce something worthy of the warrior who will carry it. The force field generators housed within them are described in the lore as providing protection not just to the warrior's flesh, but to their soul, which is a poetic way of expressing the spiritual as well as the physical protection the shield provides. In a universe where psychic and demonic threat are real and devastating, that kind of protection carries weight beyond the metaphorical. Just the master-crafted power swords they carry are similarly exceptional, weapons of extraordinary quality, with strength augmentation and penetration capabilities that make them capable of cutting through armor that would stop most other melee weapons. These are not tools for fighting ordinary opponents. They are instruments calibrated for fighting the kind of targets that the Honor Guard's proximity to the Chapter Master inevitably attracts. Enemy champions, commanders, creatures of particular power, who have sought out the leadership of the Imperial force as a priority target. Different chapters have integrated the Blade Guard veterans into their existing traditions in ways that reflect their distinctive cultures. The Dark Angels, characteristically, have absorbed the Blade Guard veterans into the Deathwing and integrating them into the broader structure of the Inner Circle tradition and requiring them to undergo the same processes of ritual initiation and gradual revelation that define Deathwing membership. For Primaris Marines who joined the Dark Angels after the Ultima founding, this creates an interesting complication. They have to be assessed for initiation into a brotherhood that doesn't entirely trust them yet, because they haven't been through all the stages of progressive revelation that their firstborn counterparts have undergone. The tension between the Dark Angels' need for Primaris reinforcements and their deeply ingrained institutional suspicion of anyone they haven't had the opportunity to fully evaluate is one of the quieter ongoing dramas in contemporary Dark Angels lore. The Space Wolves, characteristically, was simply inducted the Blade Guard veterans into the Wolf Guard. There was no elaborate ritual reconfiguration needed. The Wolf Guard's fundamental criterion for membership has always been deed over seniority, and Primaris warriors who have distinguished themselves meet that criterion as naturally as any Fenrisian-born Space Wolf. The Void Claws, Logan Grimner's specialist boarding formation, were quick to identify Primaris warriors whose particular skills suited the close-quarters nightmare of ship-to-ship combat. For the Blood Angels and their successors, the Blade Guard veterans represent something more specific: the post-devastation of Baal reinforcements, the influx of new warriors who arrived with the Indomitus Crusade and have had to integrate into a chapter that was psychologically shattered by what it experienced on Baal. As the Sanguinary Guard were rebuilt partly from these warriors, Primaris veterans of Blood Angels' heritage who were trained in the same traditions, inducted into the same brotherhood, and equipped, where possible, with the same sacred arms and armor. There is something poignant about this. A tradition that survived the destruction of almost its entire membership, not once, but twice, rebuilt again from warriors who were themselves new to the chapter's full history. What the Blade Guard veterans represent at a conceptual level is the Primaris generation's claim to the Honor Guard tradition. Not a replacement of it, but a continuation, a demonstration that the values and the standards and the commitment that define the Guard can be carried forward into this new era of enhanced warriors and galaxy-shaking catastrophe. The galaxy has changed enormously since the tradition began. The warriors have changed, enhanced by Call's developments beyond what the original Astartes could achieve. The enemies have multiplied and diversified and intensified, and yet the Honor Guard, in whatever form it takes, persists. The tradition of standing at the commander's side, of being the best the chapter has to offer, of treating the role as vocation rather than assignment, continues. Part 10. The voice that speaks without words, banners and the ancients who bear them. There is something that most military traditions across human history, in the real world and the fictional, have understood instinctively. The banner matters. Not because a piece of cloth or metal on a pole has any intrinsic power, but because of what it represents and what it does to the soldiers who see it. In the Warhammer 40,000 setting, this psychological reality is amplified by the institutional weight of the Adeptus Astartes. A Space Marine chapter's standard is not just a flag, It is an artifact of concentrated history, a physical object that has been present at battles the chapter's founding warriors fought before any living member was born. That has absorbed, in whatever metaphysical sense the setting uses, the memory and honor of everything the chapter has done. The imagery woven or engraved or painted into its surface is not decorative. It is a text, readable by every warrior in the chapter, each symbol precise in its reference to specific battles, specific heroes, specific values that the chapter has decided define who they are. Thus, the chapter Ancient, the standard bearer, is selected with the understanding that they will defend this object with their life. This is not metaphorical. If it comes to a choice between the Ancient's personal survival and the banner's preservation, the banner takes priority. This is a genuinely extraordinary commitment to ask of any warrior, and the fact that these warriors accept it without reservation is part of what makes the Ancient role one of the most prestigious in the chapter. The company Ancient performs a similar function at the company level, carrying the company standard into battle, providing a visual focal point for the warriors around them, serving as the physical embodiment of the company's identity and honor. These standards are ancient relics in their own right, each one carrying the history of the specific company that has fought beneath it. What's interesting about the Ancient role is the specific virtue being rewarded. Most honor guard positions reward some combination of martial excellence, accumulated experience, and loyalty. The Ancient is specifically selected for stubbornness and resilience, the capacity to keep holding on, to keep standing, to refuse to fall, even when everything around them is chaos and fire, and the tactical situation has deteriorated beyond recovery. This isn't a passive quality. It's an active choice, made repeatedly, in the worst possible circumstances. The ancient records of almost every chapter contain stories of moments when the banner almost fell, when the ancient was surrounded, or wounded, or confronted by something that should have been insurmountable, and held on anyway. These moments become the stories that are told. They become the examples that recruit companies learn. They become part of the mythology of specific chapters in ways that shape how those chapters understand themselves. When a warrior joins the Space Marines and goes through their training, they learn the stories of the ancients as part of learning what their chapter values and what it means to live up to those values. The standard bearer is not just holding a piece of cloth. They're holding the story of everything the chapter has been, and every decision they make about when to hold and when to advance is being made with the awareness that their actions will themselves become part of that story. In the Primaris era, the role continues with the Blade Guard Ancient, a Primaris warrior drawn from the Blade Guard veteran squads, who carries the chapter's sacred standards in battle. The most revered of these banners incorporate the remains of fallen heroes of the chapter, built into the standard itself, ensuring that the presence of the dead accompanies the living into battle in a very literal way. There is something quietly profound about this. In a setting where death is omnipresent and largely treats the dead as absent, these banners insist on the continued presence of those who have fallen. They are with you. They are in the banner you carry. They are watching, and their presence inspires the warriors around them to achieve something worthy of the company they keep. At Part 11, the living ideal, what it means to serve in the Honor Guard, we've travelled a long way through the specific expressions of the Honor Guard tradition, the Ultramarines with their axes of Ultramar, the Blood Angels with their golden armour and 10,000-year-old grief, the Space Wolves with their Fenrisian brotherhood of deed, the Dark Angels with their bone-white armour and infinite secrets, the Black Templars with their divine calling and eternal crusade, the Blade Guard veterans carrying the tradition into a new era. It's worth, before we close, stepping back from the specifics and thinking about what all of these traditions share, what the Honor Guard means at a level that transcends the individual chapters that maintain it. At its heart, the Honor Guard is an answer to a question that the Adeptus Astartes are not supposed to be asking. Space Marines are bred and trained to be instruments of the Emperor's will. They are weapons, in the most literal possible sense. Engineered weapons, given intelligence and faith, and the capacity for complex decision-making, but weapons nonetheless. The official theology of the Imperium and the self-understanding of most Space Marine chapters doesn't really have room for the idea that a warrior might grow into something that transcends the purely instrumental. They serve, they fight, they die, or they keep fighting until they've accumulated enough experience that dying seems increasingly difficult. That's the arc. The Honor Guard complicates this. It's because the Honor Guard is explicitly more than just a collection of very effective weapons. It is an institution with memory, with tradition, with a relationship to the chapter's history that goes beyond tactical utility. The warriors in the Honor Guard are not just the most capable fighters their chapter produces. They are the living embodiment of what the chapter aspires to be, its ideals, concentrated into a handful of individuals who have earned the right to represent those ideals in the most visible, most physically immediate way possible. This is why, when one of them dies, the response is not just tactical adjustment, it is grief, however suppressed it might be in the culture of a warrior fraternity that values stoicism above most emotional expression. As to the loss of an Honor Guard member is the loss of a piece of what the chapter means. The chapter ancient who falls carrying the standard, the champion who takes a blade that was meant for the chapter master, the sanguinary guard member who burns out his last moments in a display of supernatural fury, defending something worth defending. These are not just casualties. They are moments that the chapter will remember and retell and draw meaning from for as long as the chapter exists. The other thing the Honor Guard represents, across all its various expressions, is a particular relationship between excellence and responsibility. In most human cultures, the recognition of exceptional ability leads to an increase in the exceptional individual's own freedom. More options, more choices, more ability to pursue personal goals. You see, in the Adeptus Astartes, and specifically in the Honor Guard tradition, the relationship works differently. The more exceptional a warrior proves themselves to be, the more tightly they are bound to a specific set of responsibilities. The chapter champion's skill is extraordinary, and that skill is pledged entirely to the chapter master's protection. The ancient's resilience and steadfastness is remarkable, and those qualities are devoted to the banner's preservation, not the ancient's own advancement. The Wolf Guard's achievements are the stuff of saga, and those achievements earn them a place in the Wolf Lord's retinue, bound more closely to his service than any of the warriors beneath them. This inversion of the usual relationship between capability and freedom is philosophically quite interesting, as it reflects a broader truth about the Space Marine cultural understanding of honor, that the highest form of service is not the pursuit of personal glory, but the subordination of extraordinary ability to the chapter's collective welfare. The warrior, who could achieve anything they attempted, chooses to achieve specifically the things that their chapter master, their emperor requires of them. That choice, the deliberate limiting of possibility in service of a specific duty, is what transforms a very capable warrior into something that carries the weight of the Honor Guard tradition. And there's a last thing worth sitting with. The Honor Guard are, in some fundamental way, the chapter's relationship with their own history made manifest. Each member carries the memory of everything they've done, and through them, the chapter touches its own past in a way that purely institutional records can't provide. The old Ultramarines veteran who remembers campaigns fought before the current generation of warriors was born. The sanguinary guard member who carries the tradition of warriors who fought beside Sanguinius himself. The Wolf Guard elder, whose sagas reach back through multiple generations of Wolf Lords. These are the chapter's living archive. The Honor Guard, in this sense, ensures that the chapter doesn't forget what it's been, and in not forgetting, doesn't lose its sense of what it should continue to be. There is a price for this. The price is everything else. The opportunities not pursued, the personal glory not claimed. What the saga that will never be told, because the Honor Guard warrior spent his centuries standing at someone else's side, rather than carving out a legend of his own. But the warriors who fill these roles don't seem to experience this as deprivation. They have found, in the service itself, something more satisfying than personal glory could offer. The knowledge that what they protect is worth protecting, and that their protection of it makes the difference between its survival and its loss. In the grim darkness of the far future, that is not a small thing. In a universe that is actively, enthusiastically trying to destroy everything humanity has ever built, the fact that the Honor Guard keeps standing, keeps holding the line around the chapter masters and the banners and the ideals that give the Imperium whatever sense it can be said to have, is genuinely remarkable. Not because of the individual warriors, though they are extraordinary, but because of the tradition itself. Because the Honor Guard has been doing this for 10,000 years, across every catastrophe the setting can produce, and shows no sign of stopping. That, perhaps, is the deepest thing the Honor Guard tells us about the Warhammer 40,000 setting, that even in a universe defined by unending war and the constant erosion of hope, some things persist, some commitments are kept, some warriors keep standing when every rational calculation suggests they should fall, and the Honor Guard stands at their side and holds the line. There we go. Yet that's the Honor Guard, the living embodiment of 10 millennia of Astartes tradition, the finest warriors any chapter can claim, the quiet heart of everything the Space Marines aspire to be. From the Great Crusade to the Era Indomitus, from the golden wings of the Sanguinary Guard to the bone-white silence of the Deathwing, from the saga-driven brotherhood of the Wolf Guard to the divine calling of the Emperor's Champion, this tradition has shaped some of the most powerful and emotionally resonant lore in the entire Warhammer 40,000 setting. If you found this deep dive worth your time, if you're now thinking about the Honor Guard in a way that's richer than before, then please consider hitting like on the video and subscribing to the channel. Every like and subscribe genuinely helps Q on 40,000 reach more people who care about this lore as much as we do. Leave a comment telling me which Honor Guard tradition you find most compelling. The disciplined legacy of the Ultramarines, the tragic beauty of the Sanguinary Guard, the deed-driven brotherhood of the Wolf Guard, or something else entirely. These conversations are half the point. Until next time.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.